All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open a seriously old mystery, like 2,000 years old, straight from the Talmud. And it all boils down to a question we ask ourselves all the time. When is it okay to just play the odds?
I mean, think about it. We rely on probability every single day, right? You assume your food is safe. The bridge you're driving over isn't going to collapse. You even assume most people are basically healthy. But what happens when that assumption, that gut feeling, has to stand up in a court of law? Well, that's exactly the puzzle a bunch of ancient Jewish scholars decided to tackle.
Okay, so the sages, the rabbis in the Talmud, they started by breaking this down into two different ideas. First, you've got what they called an observable majority. This is the easy stuff. It's things you can literally see and count. Like, if 9 out of 10 butcher shops on a street are kosher and you find a random piece of meat, well, you can make a pretty safe bet. But then there's the statistical majority, and this is the tricky one. This is an assumption about stuff you can't see. It's the general idea that, most people are healthy, or most animals are born without any major problems.
And that right there, that's the core of the whole mystery. See, for the stuff you can see, the Torah is super clear. It says, incline after the majority. Easy enough. But what about the stuff you can't see? Where's the proof, the legal source, that says it's okay to trust that kind of majority? So, to find the answer, the sages basically kicked off this amazing, centuries-long detective story.
All right, let's get into it. This is where it gets really interesting. It's like a legal procedural. A whole series of brilliant rabbis step up to the plate, and each one thinks they found the smoking gun, the one piece of evidence from the Torah that cracks the case. So first up to bat is a scholar named Mar, son of Ravina. And his clue? It comes from the Paschal lamb. The special sacrifice for Passover. And the Torah has this really specific rule about it. You absolutely cannot break any of its bones.
And his logic is pretty slick. He says, look, if you can't break the skull to check if the lamb has some kind of deadly brain defect, then the law has to be letting you just trust the odds. It's basically saying, hey, just assume it's healthy like most other animals. Case closed, right? Makes sense.
Well, not so fast. The other rabbis shoot this down almost immediately. Turns out, there's this super clever loophole. The law says you can't break a bone, but it doesn't say a thing about, say, carefully burning a tiny hole through it to peek inside. So since a physical check is still technically possible, this isn't the definitive proof they're looking for. The hunt is back on. Okay, so next up is Rav Akka Bar Yaakov. He's got a new piece of evidence. He points to the ritual with the 2 goats on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. You might have heard of this. One goat is sacrificed, and the other one is the famous scapegoat that gets sent out into the desert. Now, here's the thing. The law says these 2 goats have to be pretty much identical. And here's the kicker. The scapegoat is sent away alive. It's never slaughtered. So there is absolutely no way to check its internal organs to see if it's healthy. This has got to be it, right? The law is literally forcing you to just trust the odds. Nope, this one fails too. And the reason is kind of wild. See, the ritual ends with the goat getting pushed off a cliff. It's completely destroyed. So the other sages argue, look, this is a totally unique situation. You can't check it before, and you can't check it after. It's an impossible case all around. So you can't use it to make a general rule for, normal life. So, another dead end.
All right, now Rav Kahana steps in, and he totally raises the stakes. We're not talking about animals anymore. He brings up a life or death case, murder. And the Torah is crystal clear. A murderer is put to death.
His argument is this. For the death penalty to actually apply, the victim had to have been a healthy person. In Jewish law, if you kill someone who is already on their deathbed from some internal illness, what they call a tarifa, it's still a terrible crime, but it's not a capital crime. So Rav Kahana says, our whole legal system must be running on the assumption that the victim was healthy. We're trusting the statistical majority. And believe it or not, even this powerful argument gets shot down with this just brilliant counterargument. Imagine this. You examine the victim's body. What if the knife wound, the very thing that killed him, is in the exact same spot as a pre-existing deadly tumor or something? The murder itself would have obliterated the evidence. You can never be 100% sure the victim wasn't already dying. And with that, the whole argument just falls apart. So, okay, after all of these super complex, high-stakes cases, the Paschal lamb, the scapegoat, even murder, they all fail. The solution, the real answer, comes from somewhere totally unexpected. The winning argument isn't about some rare, dramatic situation. It's about something much more ordinary.
The breakthrough comes from Rav Ashi, and he points to the most basic thing imaginable, just slaughtering an animal for dinner. I mean, just think about it for a second. Every single time a kosher butcher makes that cut across the animal's neck, they're taking a tiny risk. What if the knife slices through the exact spot where there was already a fatal hole in the esophagus? The act of slaughter itself would make it impossible to tell if the animal was already defective.
And this is the light bulb moment. The sages realized they've been asking the wrong question the whole time. They weren't looking for a Bible verse that allows them to trust the odds. No, they were discovering a much deeper principle about what we can and can't know. The rule isn't about getting permission, it's about necessity. You rely on the majority only when it is physically impossible to check the facts. If you can check, you absolutely must check.
And they seal the deal with this one final perfect example. They bring up this guy, Rabbi Meir. He was a scholar who was famous for being a huge skeptic. He was the kind of guy who always considered the weird minority possibility. But even Rabbi Meir was required by law to eat sacrificial meat from the temple. And because it's completely impossible for him to check the animal's organs before it's offered, the law itself forces the ultimate skeptic to trust the odds. That becomes the final, rock-solid proof. Okay, so what does all this mean? Why does this 2,000-year-old detective story actually matter today? Well, because this whole tension between what's certain and what's just probable, it's a bigger deal now than it's ever been.
Here's the real takeaway. The sages weren't just having a debate about some ancient laws for goats and lambs. No way. Through this whole journey, all the arguments and the counter-arguments, they were building this amazing framework for how to think. They taught us that the most important question isn't just, what are the odds? The real question is, can I actually know for sure? The line they drew wasn't between likely and unlikely. It was between what is knowable and what is just fundamentally unknowable.
And that leaves all of us with a really big question for our own time. We live in a world of big data, of AI, of algorithms that are constantly telling us to trust the statistical majority. So this ancient debate is still challenging us right now. When is it okay to just follow the data? And when do we have to insist on checking the facts for ourselves, even if that minority possibility seems tiny?